you did do childbirth classes. Did you do them through your hospital?
Yeah.
Okay. Did they cover at all C-sections?
So they really didn't want to. And it was before COVID hit, I happened to be in the hospital because that's where the perinatal specialists were. And we were like, why don't we just go up and do a tour? Because they said you can do it anytime. So we went up and I kept asking, I don't know if she was a nurse or somebody. I kept asking her, I was like, okay, so what happens with C-sections? And she was like, we don't really talk about that. And I was like, no, I need you to tell me about C-sections, what happens. And she's like, well, we don't really want you to have a C-section. And I was like, I don't care what you want. I want you to tell me what happens with C-section. And, she very reluctantly talked to me about it. Like, okay, the OR is over there. You're not going to be able to hold your baby afterwards. You're going to have to go into recovery, and we can't tell you one way or another whether or not you're going to have your baby. And, it is a baby friendly hospital, but they do give you the option for formula. So they didn't really push breastfeeding on me, but they couldn't really do much of anything anyway because he was in NICU and I was a mess. But yeah, they really did not want to tell me. They did not want to answer my questions about C-sections. Like, oh, well, there'll have to be a neonatologist there. If you have a section, we want you to have a vaginal birth because it's better for you and it's better for baby. And so we don't really cover those on our tour. And look at these rooms. They're beautiful and have been redone. You can labor for as long as you want in here. You're assigned to this room. When you're done having a C-section, you have to go to this curtained area and you wait there for several hours before you can see your baby. And your husband's not going to be there with you because he's going to be with baby. So like kind of one of those. And I was like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. As coming from C-section moms, we're like, what
are they talking about? Right. I mean, really, it's like you go to the VBAC group and people are like, so what's your C-section like? It was like, okay, well, your support person's going to probably be seated at the head of your bed on one side, and your anesthesiologist is going to be on this other side, and your anesthesiologist is your best friend.
Right, you can talk to them about anything. And if you're feeling nauseous, they give you stuff.
And it's like, yeah, she made it sound like, shh, we don't talk about that.
We don't do those here.
Yes, you do.
It's behind the curtain. Literally, she's like, you're going to be behind the curtain, away from everyone, hiding.
You're not going to be in a room.
You don't get one of these remodeled special rooms. Like,
there are showers in these rooms. Oh God. But yeah, I was not pleased. But like but I pushed her and I was like, you need to tell me. You may not.
Do you work here or not?
Right. Right. You may not want me to have a C-section, but let me tell you, I want me to have a C-section.
Did they offer you, because I know you wanted to breastfeed, and even though there's all this trauma and all this stuff going on, did they offer you anyone to come like counsel or do anything like to help you breastfeed, or I know that you said something about pumping. Did they bring you a pump while you were in the hospital or anything? Like, did they go over stuff?
Yeah, they brought me a pump when I was in the hospital. And then because he was early, my pump hadn't come yet. So I wound up having to rent a pump from the hospital, but I didn't speak with a lactation consultant. Like, none of those things happened. And I know what they were saying in the birthing classes that we did was that they weren't having lactation consultants coming in because of COVID. So they had what they called their warm line, where you could call if you had breastfeeding concerns. They did do a breastfeeding class virtually. So I did that. And, the other parents that were in there, weren't really sure what they wanted to do either. I was never one of those, like, I'm never going to give my baby formula people. I've always been a fed as best person. And like, I wasn't even sold on breastfeeding to begin with. I just figured, we'll try it and see if it'll work. But then once he was here, I was like, I have to do this or I'm going to be letting him down. And like formula it from the get-go. I remember he was so tiny and it was so hard to get him to eat. Like I remember those teeny tiny little bottles that you have the little nipples on there. And we were trying so hard to get like 30 milliliters into him like at a time. But yeah, I was glad that they weren't one of those hospitals that was like no formula or pacifiers at all costs. Like they were like, look, your baby needs this. We gave it to him. We didn't have time to check with you. Like we didn't know that it was critical that, that his blood sugar was that low. How would we know? But also expecting to be told what was going on before they did so. But obviously we're glad that they did it because he needed it. It would have just been nice.
It was more stress on top of all the other stress you were having. So it's
right.
Like the one thing that could have gone right didn't go right.
Right. Right. And me saying to this nurse I think it took them a couple of hours to do the repair. He was doing skin to skin for at least an hour. And that entire time I was asking, they tell you all of this stuff about the golden hour and you're supposed to be breastfeeding right away and all these things. But why is nobody telling me that I can do this? Why is no one helping me? He's not being fed. Shouldn't he be? Like, so I don't know if there's a correlation between him not being able to eat right away and his blood sugar being so low. Nobody's ever explained it.
When you were talking about that, what I was thinking why they were doing repairs and stuff, that the placenta, whatever's going on with placenta, because placenta has to come out before you can be feeding anyways. I think they might have, between you losing a lot of blood and all this stuff, they might not have wanted to come over and been like, look, there's a lot going on down here. And as much as you want to, we're going to just kind of hold off a little bit. And then we're going to see in a little while how you're doing. But right now I think they probably were just so focused on like repairs and stuff. But I do see what you're saying. Like, cause a lot of times there is like that, you give the baby kind of stuff right away and then they kind of whatever. And actually, I've learned from other people and stuff like that. If you want to breastfeed, you can give your baby a bottle right away and you can do multi and you can do all these things, but they don't tell us that. Nobody you think if you give them a pacifier or you think if you give them a bottle, even just a little bit, like a little sip to get them like going, that suddenly it's going to ruin all your chances of breastfeeding and like all this
nipple
stuff.
confusion.
But that's not true. And actually I learned from my pediatrician that almost depending on your baby, especially like with trauma and especially with stuff like that, it's almost good to give them a bottle, even if you want to do breastfeeding, because when a baby is hungry, they're frustrated. They have problems latching, they're confused. They're like, so it's almost better just to feed them. And then you can just like ease them into all the other stuff. But I do understand the pumping thing and what happens when you go home. You're like, I'm invested in this. I'm doing this and I'm going to do however miserable. And then you realize I'm getting no sleep and I'm freaking miserable and I hate my life and I don't want to do this anymore. And I was being told, like, I got told so much crap at the hospital or whatever. Like, you got to pump this and you're going to, so it was like, I was feeding him and pumping in between. Right. I was like a freaking machine going on because I thought that's what you had to do. Like, that's what we all have to do to like feed our babies. I was like, he's not eating enough. I must make sure my kid is eating enough. And then as it turned out, no, that is not good. That is not healthy. That is not the way you're supposed to be doing things. And literally my pediatrician, because I was getting exhausted. I was just like, I'm so exhausted. He was like, put the pump away, like, throw that out. Like, you don't need, you're feeding your baby. Everything's fine. So that is one thing where you were getting exhausted. When like, at least you started like noticing it, because some people just kind of push through and we end up in like some, like, I'm going to do this and this is what I have to do. And this is what it is to be a mom. No, it is not what it is to be a mom. And you can totally give your kids some and throw that pump away. Like, get rid of that pump if you need to. Stop pump, because I think pumping is worse than breastfeeding. Like, Feeding your baby, cool, but pumping, pain in the butt.
Well, both is bad. I mean, I did generally either or with some relief pumping in there, but it's like I just can't imagine doing the power pumping thing where you pump and you have some to top baby off, then you put baby on breast and baby feeds, and then you top them off, and it's like, what else do you do with your time? Because it's just like you must be doing that the whole time. By the way, I cannot say it was me, but you said someone told you on Safe Sleep, you sound like you want permission to stop. And I'm like, that sounds like something I would do. Marnie would also do that. But yeah,
that's true. Yeah. Did you talk to your pediatrician about this? About feeding and pumping and doing all this?
Yeah, she was like, just feed your baby however it works. She's like, formula is fine.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I understand the medication thing. You don't have to do this. Like, if you want to pump and dump, that's fine. If you want to wait, until medication is out of your system and breastfeed, that's also fine. But formula is also a good option. And I remember she gave us like a huge case of the powder. But that's the other thing about COVID was that there was like a formula shortage. So we weren't sure if we should bring some to the hospital because that was on the table, but we didn't know what to bring. And then we didn't know what to get or where to get it. So they sent us home that Monday and they sent us home with like a day's supply. But we were like, nothing. Okay, but where do we get this now? Like where? And they wanted us, for some reason, they wanted us to have those like ready to feed ones for however long. And like, you couldn't find it. So that was another stressful thing, but yeah.
How long was it after, since you were trying to feed and pump, and how long was it where you were like, I'm done doing that?
I want to say that I stopped at 3 months, 3 or 4 months, something like that. But it was so frustrating because it was intermittent, like I think that I might have gone longer if I hadn't had the pump literally draining the life out of me. Like it's sucking the life out of me every time I do this. But yeah, I mean, we combo fed the entire time. When I didn't have to pump and dump, I, kind of made a freezer stash. So he had that. But it was never like exclusively one or the other. And, I say to people, all the time, if, just do whatever's best for your baby and for you. Like science milk is great, don't, breast milk is great, but it's not liquid gold. And it's definitely not liquid gold if it's at the expense of your mental health. You have to figure out what your priorities are really going to be. And I knew that he was going to be healthy, just as healthy on formula as, he would have been on breast milk. And yeah, I mean, it took me a while to kind of be like, okay, I know I have to do this. Oh my God, it's part of the reason why I'm not healing. That's part of the reason why the fistula is happening and not going away. And it did after a couple of months. But even still, sometimes I'm like, why do I have, I don't know if this is opened up again. Can it open up again? Is it actually going to heal? So I have made some like frantic calls to the colorectal surgeon or my gastroenterologist. And like whenever they, do these exams, which are super fun, by the way, they're like, no, it's still fine. But apparently I'm one of those people where like the rare things happen to me, like looked up fistula, rare. Okay. Look up, postpartum hemorrhage. Look up 4th degree tear, rare. Okay. I see a trend here.
You obviously were kind of pre-planning a little bit. It wasn't like so much of as a surprise, even though it was like faster than you guys expected. How much knowledge did you know about vaginal births and maybe like the risk? And also, where were you kind of getting your knowledge? Were you looking online? Were you reading anything? Were you asking questions to anyone?
So I knew about, vaginal births. I don't know why or when I decided that I didn't want to have one, and like what might have triggered that. But it's been, for a long, long time that I've known that, I don't want to have a vaginal birth. Like I did not know the risks. I feel like there are so many people who don't know the risks of vaginal birth. Everybody's always like, C-sections, you're going to have all these complications. And I'm like, okay, listen, you want to talk about complications? I will tell you about complications. But, I had asked my mom a couple of times, so my brother and I are 9 years apart. So I know that she had an unmedicated birth with me. And then when they finally got pregnant with my brother, my mom was like, no, give me all of the drugs. And so I was like, well, okay, if that's what her, her experience was, then I'm just going to do that too. But yeah, I mean, I did do a lot of Googling. And then, they have those emails that you can sign up for, due date stuff and, when you're expecting and all that stuff. So I was getting a lot of information from there. And eventually, like, they have these like message boards that you get emails for also. And I was reading all of the stuff going, no, no, even before I had the baby, it was like, I don't think this is a good idea. And then after I had him, I would open emails like a couple of weeks later and people were like, this is a pregnancy test. Does this look like I'm positive? I'm only 3 weeks postpartum or however many weeks or months postpartum. And I was like, okay, so nobody told you about birth control afterwards. But yeah, I just had to stop reading those things because there's so much unsafe stuff going on. And really after I had him, well, while I was still pregnant, I was saying, okay, well, maybe my friend does have a point and maybe I am reading too much about this stuff and maybe I need to not read all of the things. I had all of the books. I didn't read them because I knew they were all going to, contradict each other. And, some of the stuff was going to be unsafe and whatever. I knew about safe sleep before, we had him. I found the safe sleep group, I think when I was 4 months pregnant, something like that. And Ryan was completely on board, so going into it, we knew the safety stuff, so we knew about the amount of sleep that you needed to have. We knew about, the distances, that the sleep space needs to be from other furniture, so with all of that, we were prepared. What we weren't prepared for was that I was actually having the baby 3 weeks early and everything wasn't done. So like the laundry wasn't done yet. And then he was so tiny that like one of our friends had to go all over the place trying to find preemie clothes because he was in preemie clothes for so long. So yeah, make sure that, when you're pregnant, you have all that stuff taken care of beforehand. But yeah, I mean, I didn't read a ton about, vaginal birth because I knew that that's not something that I wanted. And then when my OB told me that day that it was contraindicated, I was like, well, I guess I better start, doing a little bit of research on vaginal birth since apparently that's what I'm having. But yeah, there wasn't much time. I think it was like, it had to be like 12 hours between that appointment and when my water broke. So, and I remember coming home and being like, that's not what I wanted to do. Like, it's not what I wanted to hear, but I didn't know that, I could be like, nope, don't want to do this.